Thank you for joining us today and welcome to ChefConf 2021. My name is Heather Payton and I'm a product marketing lead at Progress, and I'm here with the awesome Bluestem Brands Windows DevOps team who'll be sharing the details of their incredible automation journey that they've been on in the last year, which included replacing System Center, implementing a CI/CD pipeline, integrating Chef with ServiceNow, and not one, but two Chef Infra client updates. But before we start, just a few housekeeping items. One, we are recording all of the ChefCon sessions that will be available on demand post-event. Questions and engagement are being handled via the chef.community.slack.com. My host is at Heather Payton. So if you have questions, I'll be monitoring the Slack channel throughout the course of the event and fielding those questions to the Bluestem team. And with that, I'll be turning it over to Tyler Priebe, who will be introducing us to the rest of the Bluestem team.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. As Heather mentioned, my name is Tyler Priebe, and I have the pleasure of giving you all a Windows view into DevSecOps success here at Bluestem Brands. First, I'd like to do a quick introduction to the team before we get into the presentation. So we have John Haggerty, who is one of our lead engineers here at Bluestem Brands. We have Jason Arvin, who is our senior engineer here at Bluestem Brands. Dustin Giles, who is also another lead engineer here at Bluestem Brands. And then we have Steve Perkins, who is an engineer here at Bluestem Brands. So here's a quick little agenda for today. So let's go ahead and get started. I'll give a quick background of Bluestem Brands. Bluestem Brands is headquartered in suburban Minneapolis and is the parent to 5 dynamic e-commerce retail brands. Bluestem offers a unique mix of retail and payment options for a diverse range of customers with a wide range of financial needs. Whether it's through our unique retail business model or diversity of brands or our company culture, we are forging our own path. With roughly 1.5 billion in annual sales, we at Bluestem have our sights set high. With so many distinct retail brands and a national footprint, there is always something exciting happening at Bluestem Brands. Our North Star brand, which includes our Fingerhut brand, has a distinctive value proposition, offering great national brand merchandise with unique payment options to a wide range of customers. That provides a unique and better shopping experience. Our Orchard brands, which includes our Hay-Band, Drapers and Damons, Appleseeds, and Blair, offer both uniquely designed and national brand fashion. We focus on serving each brand's customers with courtesy and respect, providing them with the products and services that they want and need, along with outstanding customer service. We continually innovating and improving. There is a passionate commitment to the company and to our customers that you just won't find in most other organizations. Our values of trust, teamwork, and transparency are apparent in our words and actions every business day. There is something different here at Bluestem Brands. And also, we are hiring. So go ahead and hit the link here if you would like to check out some careers. So I'll just give a environment background for our chef environment. And we'll get into more of the details later in the presentation. So our environment consists of Microsoft Windows Server 2003, 2008 R2, 2012 R2, 2016, and 2019. So when we started our journey, the Linux team already had an existing chef infrastructure to get us started. And with that, we built out a Jenkins pipeline with GitHub Enterprise. And we finally built our own servers in the cloud using Packer and Terraform. And here's just some of the challenges that we have ran into while we were building out our chef environment. Some of it was SCCM limitations, UI-based, can be cumbersome compliance processes, limited ability to automate flows as part of the CI/CD pipelines, change management bottlenecks, limited ability for multiple people to make changes given current cookbook structure, cookbook dependency issues with policies, hard to rebuild in an automated fashion, orphan processes, and another big challenge for us when we started out building out our chef environment was our company had actually filed for bankruptcy, and shortly after, COVID-19 hit and the world shut down. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to John Hagerty, who's going to talk about chef adoption.
Hey, thanks, Tyler. So I'll be touching a little bit about how we went through in the process of adopting Chef. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. I'll be touching on some key points here: stability, patching, application deployments, compliance, reporting. Talking about our Chef journey, where we were, where we're at now, and the future plans we have with Chef. So where we were, actually, we're using an application called SCCM, System Center Configuration Manager, and we're using that for all of our patching, application deployments, compliance, and reporting. And the issue that we had with SCCM is stability. So the program itself can be challenging to use, especially if you haven't had any formal training on the product. At times, it can be difficult to try and find out why certain machines listed in the SCCM says that the endpoint is active, but in fact, it's not. And it's really hard to try and figure out why the client can't be pushed down to the endpoint. What we found is moving away from SCCM and to Chef InfraServer it's really been rock solid. So that's been great help for us. And going into the patching process with SCCM, we had literally eyes on glass during patching. We couldn't rely on the system to make sure that our servers got patched within their assigned patch window. We would actually log on to every server to ensure that patches were applying, which really is not feasible long term. And then this goes back to the stability is we would run into client issues, and most of the time we didn't actually catch those until we're in the middle of our patch window. So moving to Chef, how that helped us with patching is we actually just moved right into WSUS. So we use Chef to configure WSUS on the client side using the WSUS cookbook. So we're using Chef to configure the WSUS server to talk to the Chef client cookbook. We're using that to configure the client side of Chef, basically just to tell it which WSUS server to talk to and any other client side setting configurations. And that's really what we're using for Chef for. And then what we do is we actually use PowerShell scripting to configure the WSUS server side, like approving updates, syncing between our WSUS servers, managing our patch group maintenance, and so on and so forth. What we saw was an increase of patching stability to the point where we no longer need to be watching every patch window. So that's obviously a great improvement. Next, I'll be talking a little bit about our application deployments. Again, we used SCCM to deploy our monitoring and security applications. And with that, we really needed someone that was an expert in SCCM to do this. We did lose some of that expertise over time and tribal knowledge. So, and another fallback is that it didn't have a CI/CD pipeline. So this means there may or may not have been any local dev testing, and it may or may not have been tested in some lower environment. So Chef gives us the ability to test our deployments using Test Kitchen, and we always deploy to non-production first as part of our CI/CD pipeline, which Jason will be going over later on. Next, I'll go over how we do compliance. Again, we were doing compliance with SCCM. We didn't have consistent behavior. We encountered unwanted behavior due to the lack of a CI/CD pipeline and the ability to develop locally. Chef Inspect and OHI attributes combined with some PowerShell scripting gives us the ability to completely automate our audits. That really is a huge time saver. Going through these audits, we would have to log on to each server and take screenshots of the configurations. So that's a thing of the past. Next is the reporting aspect. We were using SCCM reporting. SCCM is great, but it comes with a whole slew of these canned reports that we didn't need or use. It was collecting a bunch of information that we didn't need and we didn't use. And so it was hard to find which report we really wanted. And there was a limited ability to automate the reports. So Chef Automate is easy to use, and we leverage the API wherever it makes sense. You can go to the next slide. So here I'll be talking about what we went through to get where we are today and some of the mistakes and successes that we made along the way. So back in 2015, we started seeing that Chef and Microsoft were working together to make Chef a better solution on Windows. We saw Jeffrey Snover, the father of PowerShell, speaking at ChefConf that year and introducing Windows PowerShell DSC and how it's supported on Chef. At that time, we were interested, but not really ready to make a move to get off of SCCM and move to Chef. Fast forward to 2017, we went through some intro Chef training. We kind of got our feet wet, and that's where we kind of started experimenting with Chef. In 2018, we started a vendor-led initiative to try to get Chef on Windows. This wasn't a complete success. The problem is we tried to bite off too much, really. What we were trying to do is get everything off of SCCM, patching, compliance, app deployments, reporting, along with we were trying to do server builds, SQL configuration, IaaS configuration. And so it was really too much, and it really wasn't a success. But what we did do is we did engage with Chef Professional Consulting Services, and we scoped that down to a smaller engagement. Basically, what we did is we went and we just focused on getting patching and compliance off SCCM and into Chef. That was a huge success. And that after that engagement, we had Chef running on everything. So over the year 2020, we were able to build Cookbook for base server configuration, like configuring Chocolatey, configuring PowerShell execution policies and repositories, configuring .NET firewall policies, implement a bunch of CIS configurations. And we even went as far as using Chef as part of our package imaging process to deploy updated code and use it to deploy updated code to our existing servers as well. So where we're at today is we're focusing on removing the remaining functionality of our current configuration management tool, which is managing antivirus. So we're going to try and do that with Chef and manage antivirus as code. Along with, we're going to try and standardize application deployment processes. Right now, we have a mix between Chocolatey, Chef, and SCCM. We are going to be taking a look and seeing what Habitat may have to offer there, and we're going to choose something and make that the standard. And we're also going to try and tackle SQL Server baseline configurations. So that is all I have, and with that, I'll hand it off to Jason Arvin to go through our CI/CD pipeline.
Hey, thanks, John. Hi, everyone. I'm Jason Arvin, a senior DevOps engineer with Bluestem. I'm going to share a little bit about our CI/CD pipeline, starting with a quick overview of its components, then walking through the entire flow, and lastly, talking about some challenges that we overcame and some that we're still working on. So the first slide here, we're using a Jenkins pipeline, and we have Jenkins installed on a Windows Server 2016. And being that we are Windows DevOps, our Groovy script is written heavily in PowerShell, PowerShell 4, and some Windows Batch scripting. We're using GitHub as our code repository, and requiring feature branches, pull requests, peer reviews before we can merge to master to deploy the code to our environment. And Test Kitchen, we're using AWS to deploy 2 EC2s when we run Test Kitchen, one server 2016, another server 2019. Go ahead and move their slide there. Here's just kind of the flow, the swim lanes of our pipeline server, or our Chef pipeline. For most of the changes occur, that happens within the Cookbook pipeline. The Cookbook pipeline is represented in blue, and the policy files or the policy pipeline is represented with the orange. At the top swim lane there, we is our local development. We start by developing new recipes locally on our laptops and run test kitchen with our AWS EC2s. And once we're happy with our local code, we'll push that to a feature branch. And as we work through to the next swim lane, we run cook style and we clean up policy files, run test kitchen on our feature branch through Git and Jenkins. And once that comes back successful, we'll have a peer review, a pull request, and then we'll merge to master. Once we merge to master, we'll run cook style again, clean up, and then we'll trigger our policy pipeline. The policy pipeline then starts a cleanup by removing all the lock files in each policy directory, runs chef install to install the new policy files, cook style for typos, and then we run test kitchen again for each policy. And then once all is happy and good, we'll deploy to prod, or I'm sorry, to non-prod. After non-prod sits, we'll let that bake for a day or two, and then we'll put in a change request and push those changes to our prod environment by manually running the Jenkins job with our prod deploy parameter, just a checkbox to deploy it straight to prod. Now in that second to last swim lane, and I guess the last swim lane as well, there's a loop over policy directories. That's kind of crucial in how we designed our policy directories and our pipeline. We're putting all of our policies into one Git repo. So we will loop through each policy and deploy it. Go ahead and move to the next slide. So when we loop through each policy, it was originally a challenge because Test Kitchen, when deploying new EC2s into AWS, would take 5 to 10 minutes per directory. So as our Chef environment grew, we had more and more policies. So our pipeline runs were growing from starting at 10 minutes to 20, 25, 30 minutes, which just became a little bit too long and kind of annoying, especially if you fat finger something or typo or something and you need to change the code again real quick. It's another 30-minute wait before that policy is actually pushed out. So what we did is in one of our stages in our Jenkins pipeline, we are using PowerShell Core instead of just regular PowerShell, because PowerShell Core has the option to run a for each loop in parallel. As shown in the code in the bottom right there, we loop through each directory in parallel and run Test Kitchen. So that took our pipeline runs from 25, 30 minutes down to 5 to 10 minutes, which is much more manageable when trying to deploy code to our non-prod environment to let it bake in before we push to prod. Next slide. One other challenge we're still working on is that some of our servers, well, most of our servers are domain joined naturally. So there's some config stuff that we want to get and want to test on that are specific to our domain servers. And when we launch our Test Kitchen instances, we don't have them join the domain because we don't want to go through the trouble of removing them cleanly from the domain after the Test Kitchen run that would only last 10, 15 minutes. So when we need to test something specifically about our domain on our for Test Kitchen, we do have a couple of servers in our VMware environment that are domain joined, fully configured with Chef, and that we'll log into and build out this folder structure on a temp drive or temp directory. You see on the right there the cookbooks, and then a test directory and a recipes directory, and that allows us to run Chef client locally and test just specifically the one recipe we want before we run it through the pipeline. Because there are some instances where we have recipes that don't run during Test Kitchen because they'll always fail because it's looking for a domain specific component, and that the EC2s are not domain joined. So on the left there is the one-liner we run after building out the file structure that is just a Chef client, Z for local mode, and O to override the run list. Then you put in your name of your cookbook and the recipe specifically you want to test, and the output below will show whether the test was successful or not. Once we're happy with that, then we'll commit that to our feature branch, but we'll have to add the exclude in test kitchen so that that recipe won't run in test kitchen. Again, because it's not domain joined, it'll just fail the pipeline. Once that excludes, then we'll push to non-prod, wait a couple of days, push to prod, and then we'll finally see the results in our environment of that new recipe that we've developed. And that's all I have. Thanks. Now we'll have Dustin Giles talking about our ServiceNow integration.
Hello, how is everyone doing? Thanks, Jason, for introducing me. My name is Dustin Giles, lead engineer here at Bluestem. I'll be going over the journey with the Chef CMDB integration with ServiceNow. I do want to start by saying I'm not a ServiceNow expert, but I do play one on TV, so enjoy. So before the Chef CMDB integration, we started with ServiceNow Express as a POC. We slowly started building out our CMDB over 2 to 3 years. We had limited buy-in, limited budget for the project. It wasn't until last year we had the buy-in and the desire to build a more robust CMDB. Prior to the Chef integration, we would build our own integrations. Although they were a lot of fun building, testing and figuring out how to hit different tools, APIs or CLIs, just took a long time. We also found that some of the tools that we were utilizing, which with SCCM, we had to build custom integrations. We were using WMI calls per server, and it was good, but we had to hit every server a couple times, and it was just a little clunky. And then with SCCM, we lost some of our engineers, so some of the talent left with them, as well as we were, in general, we're looking to get rid of SCCM, and this would be a good opportunity to move off of it. We're also seeing data inconsistency, like, for example, we'd pull from VMware and the OS data, so might say like Windows 2016, but in reality it was 2019. So we couldn't rely on some of our data sources, and that began to be a big problem. So finding the right source was kind of half of our battle. And then another thing that we were doing for the Chef integration, we were using a lot of SCCM reports, especially for like what software is installed on our computers or our systems. And we later found like we're building too many reports. It was getting very littered with all different kinds of reports that didn't need to be there. And we didn't like all the clicks you had to do with the reports. So that, you can go to the next slide. As we started pushing through with finding out about this integration, the integration was new. So that was one of the challenges. We actually found out about the integration right around ChefConf last year, and we started almost immediately. So the problem there is usually don't have a lot of places to Google when something's new or any community docs. So we struggled a little bit there. We jumped right in and we started just hammering out, working on what this Chef integration can do for us. One of the things that we found, and it was probably a miss by our side because we were jumping right into it, the Chef integration does populate quite a few fields out of the box. These would be default fields that you would not have customized or made yourself. One of which that we did find that kind of hit us, but we had a lot of the ServiceNow information backed up, was the description field. In the graphic to the right, you can see like a before description and an after description. So before we would describe our server and what it does in that description field. Once we implemented the integration, we found that it was describing the OS and the build number, so it overwrote what we had. The other challenge we kind of had is there's very little expertise in house for ServiceNow. So we didn't write any like background scripts they can do in ServiceNow, and we heavily utilized our skill set using PowerShell. Go ahead to the next slide. So the integration, the benefits, Chef plus ServiceNow. Oops, sorry. ServiceNow kind of made it to be our one-stop shop for installed software, client runs, clients reports, and attributes. This data appears to be pulled every 4 hours in batches of 50 by default. So in the screenshot, you can kind of see all in that picture, the Chef version, the client run was success. Our compliance report does show failed status, so we will have to look into that. The other thing you can see is that attributes table. I'm gonna kind of go into that a little bit further in the next slide or two, but go ahead and go to the next slide. So that attributes table, we're using X Chef Automate attributes. This has a lot of data, but maybe some people don't know how to utilize this data. The data here, so we went from using our known tools such as ServiceNow API and using PowerShell to pull that information. So on the right hand, you can see the different data that we had in the automatic table. It's all in there. It's JSON. It's hard to read. So how do you pull that? So we went to PowerShell and ServiceNow API, and down below is an example of the PowerShell code to do this. And then I'm actually gonna demo this so you can actually see this live. Go ahead into the next. So it's always fun doing a demo. I always refer back to my buddy Jason. So here you can see our URL. You're able to hit the attributes. I'm searching for the server name test sn chefconf. Do a invoke REST method to get the results, and then I use this convert from JSON and convert it as a hash table. You will need PowerShell 7 to use the dash hash table. Well, what that will provide you is a list of different things inside of that automatic table. So here you can see the different things you can kind of dig into. You have, platform, family, installation type, memory, AD, domain. So you can kind of dig through a lot of that. I'm going to go through each of these, and you can kind of see here's the CPU. It tells you one rail, and then the amount of cores. The kernel will show you the OS build version, the OS caption name, and then you can dig into some of these a little bit further as well. And then I'll just quickly kind of show you memory. You can find uptime. And one of the cool things that we found in there is all the installed packages. So you can kind of see what you all have installed directly from ServiceNow. And then you can kind of combine each of the hash tables or a couple of the different properties from the hash table and get kind of a cool report kind of quickly from this type of data. Go ahead and go to the last slide, Tyler. The next steps that we have for the future is we're looking at adding more data to our CMDB, utilizing that attributes table. We feel like we've just kind of started with the tip of the iceberg, so we're going to be going through more of that. The other thing that we've started reading through is how to change the default for the data feed. The data feed is the feed that how often ServiceNow gets the data populated into it. Currently, it's every 4 hours, and it does batches of 50. I showed the little patch file example that we're gonna kind of tweak, maybe have longer intervals and maybe bigger batch sizes. We have not played with it, so wish us luck. It does seem like it's not hitting every one of our systems because we do pull in all of our Windows and Linux servers, and we have quite a few. And then finally, I just want to thank everyone for the opportunity to share our journey with the Chef integration to ServiceNow, and I'll pass it off to Steve.
Hello, I'm Steve Perkins. I'm a DevOps engineer with the Windows environment at Bluestem Brands. To summarize, I'm going to cover our process and how we keep our Chef clients up to date and discuss an issue that we had overcome with Update. To start with, we'll go reasons for wanting to stay up to date. Now, like Tyler had mentioned before, we had Linux running on Chef prior to our implementation on our Windows servers. Linux team had run into some major roadblocks on major version upgrades. We wanted to avoid those kind of issues by staying current and, of course, take advantage of the latest and greatest that Chef has to offer for our environment in the process. As far as the actual update process, it's very straightforward. We'll take our updated installer, stage it on a deployment Chocolatey server. We'll then change the version number and checksum in our default.rb for our baseline policy file as shown below. The pipeline then deploys to non-production servers, which get updated, allowing us to test for any issues before we go to our main production environment. Now, I know that sounds pretty straightforward. As we all know, there are bound to be issues. Next slide, please. So the main issue that we had run into recently, there was a roadblock where some of our older servers were running PowerShell 2.0. The updater utilizes a convert-to-JSON commandlet available on PowerShell 3.0 and up. To solve for this, we found a function, and it was called convert-to-stjson. This was created by Joachim Borgers Fedson, and details and code can be found in the link shown on the screen. This allows us to take the convert-to-stjson and create an alias for that, allowing the functionality for PowerShell 2.0. So we take the function, add it to a PowerShell profile, and then create an alias for convert-to-JSON inside of the profile. This allowed the same scripting that worked on all the other servers to work for the ones with the older versions of PowerShell. We had also scripted an update to some of the core.rb files for Chef Infra to allow for profiles to load and change how convert-to-JSON commandlet gets handled. Next slide, please. With that, I'd like to conclude our presentation of the Windows Chef environment for Bluestem. Today, we covered Bluestem's background and environment, our process of Chef adoption, breakdown of our CI/CD pipeline, details about our ServiceNow integration, and how we kept our Chef clients up to date. I'd like to give a shout out to our Chef success partners, John Roach and Skylar Lane. We wouldn't be where we are today without them. And I want to thank you for attending our presentation.
Great. Thank you, Stephen, and the rest of the Bluestem team. Absolutely great presentation. Tons to take in through all that. We have received a few questions from the audience out there. If the team wants to come back on camera. Hello. And I'll try to parse these out by presenter as we receive them. One question, I guess, Jason, I'll start this one off with you. On the pipeline you showed, are using inspect files for testing? How does that play into the pipeline?
We are using inspect. We have a separate pipeline for that. This was specifically our cookbook and policy files for Chef Infra, but we do have inspect running with our Chef Automate environment and a completely separate pipeline for it.
Awesome. John, a question. You mentioned that you're using the Automate API for everything you can. Can you kind of give examples of that and kind of what drove you to using the Automate API?
Yeah, sure. So we do have audits that take place, and are using a lot of InSpec. So it's really convenient just to, when we get the audits in, audit request to provide evidence, that we can just hit the API and generate reports and pass that along to the auditors. It just makes it very simple, quick, easy, and we don't have to spend time, hours of logging onto servers and taking screenshots of configurations.
Great. Great. Looking through the questions here. Okay, Dustin. ServiceNow. Where do you view your ServiceNow data? Do you have like dashboarding tool, or how does kind of the reporting roll up for that?
Yeah, we have a couple different ways. We actually can use the GUI itself. So logging into ServiceNow. And then we also are really heavily using PowerShell to create some custom reports using the API of ServiceNow, and just selecting the fields that we might need. Kind of one of the things that I quickly showed in the demo is the installed software. If you wanted to ever find it on a few servers, it's a really quick way to just populate that.
Great. And there was a follow-on question there on how do you use that data to drive remediations? Have you built any automated processes, or kind of how does that tie into your remediation process?
So one of the biggest ways that we've actually seen benefit of it is doing a MS true up of pulling the CPUs and knowing different cores for the audit itself. So our Microsoft true up was kind of a good way to show off some of that detail that we were able to populate with the Chef integration.
Great. Kind of throughout the presentation, you called out policy files. A lot of our Chef users out there are still a little scared off of policy files. Is there any advice on, how to get started with policy files and, what the first steps are?
Well, I can take it. So yeah, we were a little scared at first too, because the Linux team is not using policy files, right? And when we started down the journey of trying to adopt Chef and implement it on Windows, we weren't really knowledgeable of policy files. But with the engagement with Chef Professional Services, they really walked us through how to configure them and how they work. And after getting that just base knowledge, we really, I think it's the way to go. Even the Linux team is coming over and they're thinking about switching over to using policy files instead.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay. I have one more kind of question out there. Just, for teams out there still using SCCM and, pull-based systems and maybe not pipelines yet, you guys went on this incredible journey over the year. Kind of talk about how do you get started? How do you start talking to your management about the benefits and kind of moving forward with, the strategy of pushing everything into a pipeline?
Well, it's really, if you want infrastructure as code, SCCM is really not the tool. SCCM is a powerful tool and it does have its place, and I'm sure a lot of companies are happy with using it. But I would just say, start small, right? Have one or two things that you want to accomplish, and focus on those and get those before you start moving on to the next thing. You don't have to try and take everything out of SCCM and put it in the Chef all in one go. We are still migrating off the last bits off of SCCM and into Chef, so it is a process. Great.
Okay, I lied. There's one more question. Just after the upgrade of Chef Infra Client 17, what are some of the biggest benefits you've seen?
Yeah, I can take that one.
Sure.
The biggest benefit is we found is getting away from the supermarket audit cookbook with Chef Infra 17 audit, the compliance phase is built into the client. So we worked again with our chef success team to remove our dependency on the audit cookbook and just use the built-in compliance phase, which was super easy and super simple. And now we don't need to hit supermarket for it.
Awesome, that is great. And compliance phase is just getting better, as you'll see in Tim's presentation at ChefCon. So that is great to hear. With that, then, I don't see any more questions, and we're at the event end time. So we're going to go ahead and wrap things up. If you have additional questions for the BlueStem team, please go ahead and direct them on the Slack channel to my name, Heather Payton, and I will fill them for you. And with that, I hope everybody has an awesome time at ChefConf and hope to see you all on the celebration event. Thanks and have a great day.